Hi guys. On our last video we finished up talking about Rostow's model with traditional society, preconditions for takeoff, drive to maturity, and we needed to talk about shortcomings of the two development paths. So we have self-sufficiency challenges. This is the protection of the inefficient businesses. So we have guaranteed high prices that are made possible by isolation from international competition, and these create little incentive for businesses to improve the quality of the product or to become more efficient. So you can imagine if a business is guaranteed because it's the only business around, that they're never going to have good products, that they're never going to have good quality because they're the only company. Also, companies are protected from international competition. Companies that are protected from international competition aren't going to be compelled to keep up with rapid technology changes. And then the need for large bureaucracy. So a complex administrative system is needed in order to administer the controls, and that encourages inefficiency, abuse, and corruption. Some more shortcomings, international trade challenges. There's an uneven resource distribution. Commodity prices are not guaranteed to rise. Man, there are so many typos in this PowerPoint. We need to call Pearson and tell them to get on it. Commodity prices are not guaranteed to rise faster than the cost of products a developing country needs to purchase. And increased dependence on developed countries. So developing countries may allocate all resources to takeoff industries, to few takeoff industries instead of spreading resources among the other companies that provide food, clothing, and other necessities for local residents. And we have market decline. Developing countries have found increased difficulty selling their manufactured goods in a world market that has recently declined for many products. So why do countries face Why do countries face obstacles to development? International trade approach triumphs. Most countries have embraced the international trade approach since the late 20th century. Trade has increased more rapidly than wealth as measured by the GDP. And optimism about the benefits of this development model are based on three observations. One, if existing developed countries used this approach, then why couldn't others find similar success? Two, sales of raw materials could generate funds for developing countries that could promote development. And three, a country that concentrates on international trade benefits from exposure to the demands, needs, and preferences of consumers in other countries. So, hold on, let me grab my book. Okay, so this shows us the trade as a percentage of GDP, and based on the year in developed and developing countries. And okay, so this shows us the world trade as a percentage of income. Trade as a percentage of GDP increased rapidly in developing countries beginning in the late 1990s. The severe recession that began in 2008 caused a sharp decline in trade. Okay, and why do countries face obstacles to development? Financing development. Finance comes from two primary sources. One, the direct investment by transnational corporations. And transnational corporations are corporations that operate in multiple countries. And two, loans from banks and international organizations. So foreign direct investment is FDI, and it's defined investment made by a foreign company in the economy of another country. So FDI grew from $130 billion in the 1990s to 1.5. Well, that doesn't make sense. 1.5 what? 130 billion in the 1990s to 1.5. Hold on, let me see what the book. Aha! To 1.5 trillion in 2000 and 2010. So it grew from 130 billion in the 1990s to 1.5 trillion in 2000 and 2010. In 2010, only 2/5 went from developed. Only 2/5 of the countries went from developed to developing. A major source of FDI are transnational corporations. Loans. Two major lenders to developing countries are the World Bank, which includes the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which is the IBRD, and the International Development Association, the IDA. The IBRD provides loans to countries to reform public administration and legal institutions, and develop and strengthen financial institutions and implement transportation and social service projects. The IDA, the International Development Association, provides support to countries considered too risky to receive loans from the IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Okay, so this map shows us debt as a percentage of GNI. Developed countries have joined developing countries in accumulating substantial debts. So you can see that more developed countries, or the developed countries, are those that have debt generally 50% and above, and that that it's not just, it's not just developing countries that have debt as it used to be, that now developed countries have debt as well. So I stated that incorrectly at first, that it's not just developing countries that have a significant portion of debt, that developed countries have a significant portion of debt as well. Financing development, loans. We continue with that. Two major lenders to developing countries, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. The IMF provides loans to countries experiencing balance of payments problems that threatened expansion of international trade. The IMF assistance is designed to help the country rebuild international reserves, stabilize currency exchange rates, and pay for imports without the imposition of harsh trade restrictions or capital controls that could hamper the growth of world trade. The IMF, the World Bank, and developed countries fear that granting, canceling, or refinancing debts without strings attached will perpetuate bad habits in developing countries. So just handing out money all the time will allow developing countries to continue to, not spend wisely, or continue to want money to just be given to them. Developing countries are required to prepare a policy framework paper outlining a structural adjust program, which includes economic goals, strategies for achieving the objectives, and external financing requirements. So this is kind of like a plan of action. So what they're going to do to change, what they're going to do in order to get better, and how they're going to fix these problems before they're given these loans. So the heart of global economic crisis in developed countries was the poor condition of many banks and other financial institutions. Bad loans were especially widespread in housing. So in the United States, this was something that definitely came to a head in 2008. This led to the housing bubble, and this was a rapid increase in the value of houses followed by a sharp decline in their value. The bubble burst because of relaxation of long-standing restrictions on the ability of individuals to purchase houses, and higher income people took advantage of low interest loans to buy additional houses. So what was happening for a lot of people is that people were given the ability to get loans on houses that were way beyond their means. So people who made enough money to generally finance a home worth $100,000 were given loans to finance a home worth $300,000. And what happens in that situation is, of course, people are unable to pay off those loans. And so what happens is they get underwater in their loan and or upside down in their loan, and they owe more than they can possibly ever pay, and they have to foreclose on their home. And then what it's saying here is people take advantage of those houses that have to be sold very cheaply. And so people were able to buy houses at a very low rate, and this bubble bursts, and that's one of the things that caused the huge economic recession that started in 2008. So this graph shows the housing bubble. House prices doubled in the United States between 1999 and 2006 and declined by 1/3 between 2006 and 2009. The graph displays price as an index set at 100 in 2000. For example, a house that sold for $100,000 in the year 2000 would have been sold for $80,000 in 1995, $190,000 in 2006, and $125,000 in 2012. So, for example, if you bought your house in the year 2000 and you paid $100,000 for it, and then you got into financial trouble, you in 2006 would only get $190,000 for it. So not only would you be in trouble financially, but you would lose money when you sold your house. And then if you wait, I said that wrong. Sold for $100,000. For example, house that sold at $100,000 for $2,000 sold and would have been sold in okay. I just said the years wrong. So if you bought your house for $190,000 in 2006 and got into financial trouble, you would only be able to sell it for $125,000 in 2012. So in just 6 years, your house would have lost $65,000, whereas generally a house should gain in value rather than losing value, especially at that extent. So, making progress in development. Emanuel Wallerstein, who is an important, oh gosh, I'm so popular this morning, who is an important geographer, one of the ones that we're going to research in a couple days, a U.S. social scientist, posited a world systems analysis that unified the world economy, with developed countries forming an inner core area, whereas developed countries occupy peripheral locations. And developing countries in the periphery have less access to the world center of consumption, communications, wealth, and power, which are clustered in the core. Okay, so this shows us the core and periphery, and this unorthodox world map projection emphasizes the central role that developed countries play at the core of the world economy. So this is Wallerstein's idea of core and periphery, that the relationship between developed countries and developing countries is described as a north-south split. Closing the gap. Progress in reducing the gap in level of development between developed and developing countries varies depending on the variable. So if we look at infant mortality rate, that gap has narrowed from 17 to 6 per 1,000 infants born in developed countries, from 107 to 44 in developing countries. So out of 1,000 babies born, it used to be 17 infants would die, now 6. In developing countries, it used to be 107, now 44. However, the life expectancy gap has not narrowed. The GNI per capita, the gap in wealth between developed and developing countries has widened, which means the poor people are poorer and the rich people are richer. So if we look at this graph of HDI value, remember HDI is Human Development Index. The HDI has improved relatively rapidly in developing countries with medium HDI scores. And this graph shows us the infant mortality rate changed by HDI level from 1980 to 2011, and it tells us the developing regions have closed the gap rate changed by HDI level. Developing regions have closed the gap in infant mortality rates. However, on the life expectancy graph from 1980 to 2011, all regions have seen substantial progress in increasing life expectancy. And in GNI per capita by HDI level from 1980 to 2011, the gap in wealth between developed and developing regions has increased. So we see the poor people are just being poor and the rich people are richer. Fair trade. Fair trade is defined as commerce in which products are made and traded according to standards that protect workers and small businesses in developed countries. For example, in North America, 10,000 Villages is the largest fair trade organization in North America. Because fair trade organizations bypass distributors, a greater percent of the retail price makes its way back directly to the producers. And fair trade requires employers to pay workers fair wages and permit union organizing and comply with minimum environmental and safety standards. So for example, you'll see fair trade a lot on coffee, on other foods, and other products that indicate that that fair trade elements are taking place. So the workers are getting fair wages, unions are allowed, and they're using environmental and safety standards. So that's what that means when you see fair trade on a product. Okay, so let's summarize. To summarize, the HDI, so the Human Development Index, measures the level of development of each country. It's calculated by combining 3 measures: the standard of living, a long and healthy life, and access to knowledge. The UN has not found a single country in the world where the women are treated as well as the men. And historically, this is accurate. Historically, we've seen that in countries where women did have complete control, they ended up trying to have egalitarian societies wherein men took over. So even historically, this has not worked. Development depends on abundant, low-cost energy. And to develop more rapidly, developing countries must adopt policies that successfully promote development and find funds to pay for it. By the way, this was a really sad note considering yesterday was International Women's Day. Yay! And that it's Women's Month. Go March. So the end, and I will see you later, Gators.